a former FBI agent and cybersecurity expert. Jeff actually was an FBI special agent for over 20 years, during which he investigated cybercrime, organized crime, human trafficking, and terrorism, amongst other topics. Jeff has lectured at Harvard and Princeton University and has written two highly reviewed books. So, with that being said, I know everyone is excited to hear from you, Jeff. I will hand it over to you and enjoy, everyone.
Hi, Derek. Thank you, Derek. Thanks. Sorry I jumped the gun earlier there, but appreciate the comments, Derek. Thank you all for joining this session to hear about this very important information. As you just heard from Derek, I spent 20 years with the FBI. For most of my career, I was involved in white-collar crime. Wait, that doesn't sound right. I investigated white-collar crime, but cybercrime is a major type of white-collar crime that we'll be talking about today. And I like to focus on prevention. And when you think about medical practices, whether it be dental or any other type of medical practice, you house a lot of information that criminals go after. In fact, of all the I guess, private type of informations that are subject to privacy laws, type of information that's subject to privacy laws, you may house all three of these. All right. We're talking about credit card information, potentially. You certainly have identifiable information on the part of your patients, and then health information, which is subject to the most privacy regulations. And any type of breaches involving this information could result in sanctions, lawsuits, as well as just mad patients and downtime, which could cost you money as well. So we're going to talk about ways today to protect the information you have, and then we'll also talk about some ways to keep the money safe that you have and how criminals go after that as well. So five different topics for today's event, and we'll go into these each one at a time. And again, thank you for being here. And before we get started, I'd like to also point out national media will ask me to do television interviews, and this is a screenshot of one of those interviews that I did on CNBC. And it was after some cybercrime event, and they wanted to know, what can the FBI do to dismantle or disrupt the cyber criminal organizations? It's a little different than your traditional criminal organization, like a terrorist organization or a human trafficking organization or a organized crime, for instance. When you take off the head, if you go after the leaders and you get them, that usually is disruptive to the entire organization. But with cyber organizations that we're experiencing today, we'll just call them we'll call them Crime Inc., a cybercrime organization. There's no really clear leaders. They are organized in more of a modular fashion. And if one person, even if you were to get one person in this group, and you're not because they live in other countries and they're not going to be extradited to the United States, but even if you took one out, right, they just replace it with someone else. And these people work together, but they may not even know the other people and who they are. So you can't get somebody to flip on someone else to go to a higher level in an organization. They may not even be in the same country. I also are out of the reach of the FBI. As an example, take a look at a coder, for instance. There's a lot in the news about the country of Venezuela right now, but I want to use this example from the State Department. If you're going to travel internationally, these countries that are in red on this world map are the ones you should not go to, according to the State Department. The only one in the Western Hemisphere is Venezuela. Now, I bring this up because there is a doctor in Venezuela. If you had a problem in Venezuela, maybe you don't want to. You wouldn't want to go there, but I let this guy treat. He seems like a decent guy based on his picture, but you also have to understand that he is wanted by the FBI for creating malware that's used in ransomware attacks. And my point of telling you this is he's not coming to the United States to face charges. So there's no consequences for his actions. There's no deterrence. So the crimes continue unless we know his tricks. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to stay safe. Now, besides breaches that occur that involve lots of embarrassment, loss of information, loss of customers or patients' information, you also have the lawsuits that will almost invariably follow. And this is just an example from the dental world of a lawsuit involving a breach of information. Over $1 million was paid, and that's in addition to the other costs involved in a ransomware attack. Now, maybe that guy in Venezuela wrote the malware that's used for this ransomware attack. So he's not going to be facing charges, so he'll just keep doing it. But how do we stay safe from these types of attacks? And how do we avoid the lawsuits that may occur if we are victimized in these attacks? So this is just a slide I put together that just shows you things that lawyers for the other side are going to look at and use as evidence that you didn't do enough to keep the patient's information safe. And I'll just highlight one of them for you. Incomplete monitoring would be one thing. Undocumented or untested security controls. That's one thing that you might consider when you talk about multi-factor that could have prevented a cyber attack. In many cases, we've seen examples of that. So this presentation will get into some of those tools that we can use not only to avoid lawsuits, but to keep your information protected to begin with. Now, I use this example because Change Healthcare was the biggest breaches that we've had in terms of patient information. And it was actually done by a cybercrime organization known as the Alpha V Gang. And this could have been prevented. This massive breach of information could have been prevented with multi-factor authentication. And we'll explain what that is if you don't know it already, but it's an easy thing to implement as you protect your systems with not only a password, but then a code that's sent to a mobile device or an authenticator app that allows you to log in. The criminal could be 6 miles away or 6,000 miles away. They can't log in without that code that gets sent to a mobile device or an authenticator app on a mobile device or another system. That would have prevented this breach. Can you imagine? Now, sometimes when you're on national TV, the interviewers ask you questions that you don't know the answer to, and that's happened on occasion. And one time they asked me a question. They said, "Agent Lanza, how do you know a meth lab when you see one?" Well, that's the wrong agency. See, that's the DEA, not the FBI, that works and investigates meth labs, works in that area. And so I have to come up with an answer because it's live TV. So here you go. How do you know a meth lab when you see one? All right. There's your yellow lab. There's your black lab. There's your chocolate lab. And there's your meth lab right there. So CNBC was shocked by that answer. But I use that example for more than just humor. It also goes to show you that sometimes you don't always get what you expect that you're going to get. When it comes to cybercrime, there's a lot of sleights of hand out there. We're going to talk about those and what to look out for. So let's start with some of those sleights of hand. Let's talk about social engineering to get us to do things that they want us to do so they can accomplish their cyber crimes. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services puts out a breach report. It's updated on a regular basis, just about every day, and practices that involve personal health information that have breaches have to report this by law to the Health and Human Services, depending on the nature of the breach. And this is just an example of some healthcare providers that have had situations occur, the amount of individuals affected, and other things that you could see in the various columns on this sheet. Now, you can also screen this, or I should say, filter this for more specific information. If you just put in like dental practices, for example, you would see a list of the dental practices who have been victims of breaches. And you could see these are all pretty recent cases within the last year or so. And it also talks about the type of breach. And so I've also filtered this for the type of breach, and I put in email. And you could see many of these cases, even some very recent ones, had to do with the breach occurred because of something that was contained in an email, generally a link to a fake website where they stole login credentials, or maybe a link that had malware or a attachment that had malware in it, which allowed someone to download malicious software on a computer, which allowed the criminals to get access to that computer and commit a ransomware attack or some other breach. So let me give you an example how that works. So here's an email that could be used to do just what I described, to get access to an email account. So if you clicked on it here, because there's a problem with supposedly Office 365, That would take you to a fake login page for Office 365. So they're trying to get access to the email account of a victim. And once they get access to that, they can gain a lot of information and use that to commit further fraud. Besides spying on the person and getting a lot of intelligence, it could be used for many different facets of fraud. But if you look at this, this is a real example. And I just want to show you, there's the URL at the top that this sent me to. And always look for in URLs, always look for two-letter country codes, because back here you see that IR, that is actually a country code for Iran. So this website's being hosted, that indicates that the website is hosted in that foreign country. I don't think Microsoft is hosting websites in Iran. Now, always hover to discover. So over that valid, we're going to hold the mouse there, and that's going to reveal the site that you would be sent to before you go there. And you can see that that's going to be in Iran before you even go to that site and are, and may put your credentials in there, give them to the criminal. Now, suppose it didn't have a validate there. Suppose it just had a URL that looked like it was Microsoft's online portal. Yeah, that looks better, but it's also fake because the criminals are spoofing it. They're trying to trick us, hoping we are not going to hover. We're just going to click and it's going to take us to that site. So again, always hover to discover to make sure you're going to the right site before you click on it and put in your credentials on that site. That protect your email accounts, and by the way, social media and financial accounts are the big three that criminals go after. On a mobile device, I'm going to show you a real example. These are all real examples. So this supposedly got this email from PayPal that looks like there's something wrong with my PayPal account. Now you can't hover where it says log into PayPal, but what you can do is press and hold. And by pressing and holding on that, that's also called the long press, I'm going to get a reveal of the true link that I'd be sent to if I were to click. That should say paypal.com. It doesn't say that. Some other weird thing. And it's also in a foreign country because you see, even in this web address, you see .ac, and that refers to a foreign country as well. This was a much smaller country than Iran. It happens to be an island and a country. Only 800 people live on that island, which is 1,000 miles from a major continent. But yet one person on that island is trying to steal my PayPal credentials with this phishing email, or it could be email credentials as well. But hovering is accomplished by pressing and holding if you're accessing a site through a mobile device. This next example is illustrated by these two pictures. Of these two people, who do you think is more likely to end up on an FBI wanted list in their lifetime? Well, if you guess this person, I have not been on an FBI wanted list, at least to this point in my life, but this guy currently almost looked like I'd be aspiring to go into the mob at that point in my life. But this guy is wanted by the FBI, and he's currently wanted. He lives in Iran. And what is he wanted for? Let me blow up his wanted poster for you so you get just a better look at it. He's wanted for doing things like this nuisance things like defacing websites, but much more serious than that, exfiltrating sensitive data, gaining access to computers without authorization, and then stealing identities and using that for fraud, which means to fund further activities, further attacks, cyber-related attacks on other organizations as well. That's how they get their money. They basically rip off individuals by stealing identities. So again, he's not coming to the United States to face charges. There's no consequences. There's no deterrence. But if we know their tricks, we'll be able to stay safe. So hovering on a hovering on a computer, pressing and holding on a mobile device are two things you can do to get a preview of the URL before you go there and use your credentials to log in, which could be a fake site. The preview will help us determine that. Here's an example of how a personal email account might be hijacked or taken over by criminals. And remember, criminals always use a little technique to try to elicit an emotional reaction. Something's wrong, or it's gonna get worse. You can't log in. You're going to be logged out of your computer or logged out of your account unless you take action. Whenever you hear terms like that, words like that, that's when you don't take quick action. That's when you slow down and you think about this for a second. I'm not going to click on continue, and that's going to send me to a fake login page for whatever email account they're targeting. In this case, it's Google, which would include a Gmail account. If we give up access to our email accounts, fraud can really begin there because so much information about us, learn all about what we do, where we bank, and other facets of our lives. Email business compromise is one of the most profitable criminals, as you can see from the 2022 report that the FBI puts out every year. This one's from last year, and we see almost $3 billion in losses because criminals are taking over email accounts at the business level and then using that to commit fraud. Let's talk next about ransomware. If you know anything about codes in hospitals, there's several different codes for different things. Now they have, and actually in some hospitals, at least this one profiled in the story in the Children's National Medical Center, is has instituted a code dark, and that's a result, or it's instituted when a ransomware attack occurs. It's actually an acronym, as you can see from this tag that people wear around because it's so prolific in the healthcare industry. The DARK is an acronym for disconnect your computer, await instructions, report to managers, and then know what to do next, which is all part of the training that they would get at this particular hospital. But healthcares have been big targets for ransomware attacks because of the number, the type of information they have, which is so sensitive, the amount of information that they have, and also how important it is to keep their computers up and running. Because if they're not, then not only can healthcare suffer, but it can result in so much downtime that it could affect other businesses as well that rely upon those hospitals. Most ransomware attacks begin again with an email. Now, this is not designed to take over an email account necessarily, but if you got an email that looked like it was coming from the IRS, you might have an emotional reaction. And if you open that email, it's not going to necessarily harm your computer to open it or to look at it. But what you don't want to do is open the attachment because that could put malware on a computer. And again, the word malware, it comes from two terms, malicious software. The operative word there is malicious. Some really bad things can happen if malware gets on a computer. Not only that computer, but it can propagate through an entire network and cause ransomware attacks where computers are completely locked up until a ransom is paid. And then the criminal, if you're lucky, will provide you a key to unlock the computers that they've locked up through the ransomware attack. And they want money for that. And in some cases, it's lots of money. So in emails from unknowns, don't make sense. Like the case, the IRS is going to send you a letter, not an email. Don't open the attachment. That's the key. If we avoid the attachment, we'll be safe from this particular threat. Also, hovering helps reveal the true nature of the sender. So this sender is being spoofed to make it look like it's coming from the IRS. It's actually coming from someone with a Gmail account. Hovering reveals that. So remember, hover to discover. Also, if you don't have this in an organization already, it's a really good, easy thing to do to make sure that people are just forewarned and just have a little extra piece of information that reminds them that if an email comes from an external source, it's not an internal email, but an external source, be careful with attachments, be careful with links. This should be part of training, but also part of a constant reminder as emails coming from outside an organization could be from a criminal trying to get access to our computers and our information through those links and attachments. One story about a major ransomware attack that took place, the ransomware attack that hit the MGM casinos and hotel chain, as well as Caesars at about the same time a couple of years ago. They decided not to pay the ransom. It was a $30 million demand, even though their computers were completely locked up. They rebuilt all the computers on their own because they, on principle, did not want to pay the ransom. That was going to cost them about $100 million. They did have insurance that was going to pay for some of that. Caesars, on the other hand, decided to pay the ransom. I'll talk about that in just a second. But I want to illustrate how they got access to their computers to plant the malware which caused that ransomware attack. This is the way it happened. The criminals looked at a LinkedIn account of an employee of MGM. They sent a phishing email to hijack his email account. And once they were in his email account, then they were able to get enough information to get in about him. And they called the help desk at MGM. And he was actually an administrative person in IT at MGM. And they basically said, "Hey, I forgot my password. I am so and so. Can you help me get back in?" And they were able to answer enough challenge questions because they got access to his email account and they learned enough about him where they can answer the challenge questions correctly. They got administrative access to MGM's computers and they were in the system and launched a ransomware attack, which cost MGM, as you can see, $100 million to recover from that attack, plus tons and tons of downtime that lingered for weeks. In fact, excuse me, if you were in an MGM hotel or casino at that time, you couldn't bet on a sports event on a kiosk. Ask me how I know that, by the way. Actually, Caesars decided to pay the ransom. They were up a lot quicker. They bargained it down from 30 million to 15 million. I know this is a lot of money, but criminals do ask for that when they attack big corporations. It may not be that high of amount for smaller organizations, but still, it's a lot of money and it could hurt you. Excuse me. So why Caesars paid the money, they paid the 15 million. They had to make that up somehow. And so if you were formerly in a casino before this ransomware attack occurred and you got a royal flush on a video poker machine, paid 200 grand, depending on your bet. After the ransomware attack, it only paid $2. Yeah, they had to make up that money somehow. Yeah. Um, when I told this joke at open mic night, people were cracking up about that. I hope you appreciate it. Anyway, how does the attack occur? The attack occurs again generally through emails, 90+% of the time. You might get an email that says there's a document waiting for you and you have to enable the content, and that launches a macro which loads the malware on a computer system. The next example is something like this. Now, this really doesn't make any sense because if someone sent you an email and they said, "We have a document here that's sensitive, and we're going to attach a password to that document so it can't be opened normally unless you have the password." But you wouldn't put the password in the email itself because whoever gets the email is going to be able to open it, right? You send that to a different way to the person that's designated to open that particular attachment. So it doesn't make any sense that it be sent this way. But they're hoping that people don't notice that and would just go ahead and put the password in, and that would download the malware on your system. But why would they do this? Why would they do it this way? Because they're trying to avoid antivirus software, which may serve as a preventative method to keep that attachment from loading on a system. It could scan to see if an attachment was connected or in a document and scan that for viruses and malware. But in this particular case, it can't open that document because it needs the password to do it. And so they can't determine that there's malware in the document. And so it might make its way to the end user. So after you get infected by a ransomware attack, generally you'll see on a folder on your computer system or on the entire network, you'll see basically that all the documents, everything that's needed to run a system and the documents that are connected to that system would be encrypted. And there'll be a help document that you can open. And in that help document, it would give you this information. This is, again, a real example. And they're explaining to you, even sending you to a Wikipedia page that could tell you more about um, algorithms and asymmetric uh, cryptography. And you don't really have time to learn about all that because you're trying to get your computers up and running. You're completely down and can't do anything at all that requires the use of the computers in a medical practice. And then they give you the demand payment. Remember, this is all part of the question and answer page that you're provided that's not encrypted on a computer. And in this case, they're giving people the option of paying 3 Bitcoins for every affected system, or hey, we'll give you a volume discount. Isn't that nice of them? Just pay 13 Bitcoins and get all your systems decrypted. It's nice that they give that volume discount to us. And then after you pay the money and it's received by them in Bitcoin, and if you don't know how to pay somebody in Bitcoin, they'll tell you exactly how to do it. No problem. They'll give instructions for that. Then they basically say, "Hey, thanks a lot. We'll see you later." And hopefully your systems will be decrypted by the keys that they give you. There's no guarantee of that either. But because of that, they will have a follow-up email. They're going to ask you how the hacking experience was with them. just click on one of the smiley faces or not so smiley faces there, and it's not going to lock up your files. It's almost got to this point because ransomware attacks have become so ubiquitous, especially in the world of healthcare. So what do we do for ransomware prevention? Well, we train people, and that's kind of what we're doing here today. Using multi-factor authentication will prevent access to systems because they could be 6 miles, 6,000 miles away. As I said earlier, they can't log in because the code comes to a mobile device or an authenticator app. Also, keeping systems updated, patching systems. I know that's not necessarily your responsibility if you're not on the IT side of things, but it's a collaboration. We all do these things together, and having updated systems is critically important to preventing these attacks because sometimes the vulnerabilities that are available to criminals are fixed by companies like Microsoft and Apple and other companies that have software products. And if they're not fixed, they could leave an open door for hackers. Now, an air gap is more of a technical term that is used to signify that you have systems that are backed up, that are not physically connected to the main computer system. So think of it as this. If you backed up all your photos on your computer in the cloud, that's connected to a system, right? It can be reached through a ransomware attack, potentially. But if you backed up all your photos on a physical hard drive and removed that from the computer system, on a personal basis, you put that in a drawer, that's an air gap backup. So again, I know this is an IT responsibility, but making sure that we have a backup we can recover from that is not available to criminals. It's physically separated from the systems, either in a virtual way or a physical way, and we can recover from that. Will relieve us from paying a ransomware and paying a ransom and allow us to get back up and running a lot quicker. Also, have a recovery plan, test the backup to make sure you can recover from that, shut down systems when you've been affected by a ransomware attack. And by the way, that recovery plan should not be on a computer that's subject to a ransomware attack. Maybe a physical document that's printed out and tells people what to do in the event that there is a ransomware attack, because you might be able to retrieve that document if it's locked up on a computer that's been affected by ransomware. All right, I just want to show you this short clip. This is the CEO of United Healthcare. Remember, their subsidiary, Change Healthcare, had the massive breach in April of 2024. And as he's called before Congress, he's asked what caused the breach? How did it happen? Listen to what he says here in this very brief video.
We're continuing to investigate as to exactly why MFA was not on that particular service. It clearly was not. I can tell you, All
right, that's all I wanted to show you. MFA, multi-factor authentication, was not on the server that was used to launch the ransomware attack. So a simple computer tool that we all use and we probably use with credit card access to our credit card accounts and financial accounts was not used by this company and protecting a large amount of information that resulted in that huge breach, which they're still feeling the effects of today. Before we go on in the presentation, I want a short reflection that I'm going to share with you. Here's that reflection. I joined the FBI because I wanted to investigate the mafia. And that interest came from my family. My family owned this business in Connecticut when I was a kid growing up. I worked in this business, my dad's store. Today they call them convenience stores. It's really kind of, it's just a variety store is what we called it back then. We sold newspapers and other things. One day, the newspaper truck arrived from New York City, and I unpacked the newspapers for sale to customers, and I saw this headline. And I read the story about a mob family in New York they didn't rob a business, they didn't rob a bank, they robbed an airport. And I read below the headline, and I saw that the FBI was investigating this case, and that's when I decided I wanted to be an FBI agent. I was merely a teenager at the time, but that was my first interest in becoming an FBI agent. $5 million in today's dollars, that's 1978, is worth about $25 million today if you account for inflation. But That pales in comparison to the amount of money that's stolen just in ransomware attacks alone. Yeah, that'd be one payment of a ransomware attack in many cases. So that's just to put things in perspective for you. So 10 years after this newspaper article appeared, I did join the FBI in 1988. I have a picture of me getting my credentials at the FBI Training Academy. There I am. And you might be wondering, wait a second, is that our presenter today, or is that Jim Croce joining the FBI? Listen, if I could save time in a bottle, the first thing I would do would go back and shave off that mustache. But I wouldn't, because the mob was the mustaches were big back in the 80s, and so was the mob. And so when I got to Kansas City, I'm a brand new FBI agent, and I go in the office like on my first day, and they assign me to a mob case. I go in this room, and we're listening to a wiretap of a mobster's phone. Now, his name is Tony, and he gets a call from Joe. Now, there's a lesson here. So watch what happens next as Tony gets a call from Joe. As the FBI listens to the call, and before I get into that, by the way, I should tell you there was one more reason why I joined the FBI and to investigate the mafia is my family had a tradition. On Christmas every year, we watched a movie every Christmas in my family growing up. Five boys in this big Italian family. We watched a movie that taught me about life and loyalty and how business should be conducted. And everybody thinks the holiday entertainment in my house was filled with names like George Bailey and Mary Bailey and so forth. And it was a wonderful life that we were watching. That was not the movie that we watched. The movie that we watched was a different one. And the names that were filling my house were Vito Corleone and Luca Brasi and Johnny Fontaine. And we watched The Godfather every Christmas, so that got me more interested in the mob. So you can imagine my excitement when I was assigned to a mob case in Kansas City. These two mobsters are talking on the phone, and here's the call that we got between Tony and Joe as we listen. Tony says, "Joe, I'm really glad you called." And Joe says, "Yeah, why?" And Tony goes, "I got a little problem. I think the FBI is tapping my phone." And Joe goes, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And Tony goes, "Well, I got a new number." So, lacking any common sense, Joe goes, "Okay, good. Give me the number." Now, Tony gets a little common sense. He says, "I better not give it to you on the phone. I'll meet you for lunch and give it to you then." And Joe says, "Well, I can't meet you for lunch." And Tony says, "Okay, I'll give it to you now on the phone, but I'll give it to you backwards." So he proceeded to give him these seven digits in reverse order. And what did the FBI do? We got our best cryptologist on that one right away. We had the number figured out in record time. It only took us 6 months with the powerful computers we had in 1988 to decode the number. But I use that example. It is a true story, not the 6 month part of the story, but the phone call is true because it illustrates a key point. How critical is common sense in everyday life? When it comes to preventing fraud, it's important too, because remember this key point. Criminals are trying to get us to do things by eliciting an emotional reaction, to do something that could be risky for us. So let's talk about next endpoint attacks. Uh, this is a real example of a lot of patients' information being breached after a laptop was stolen from a car. How does that happen, right? Does that make any sense to leave an unprotected laptop in plain view in a car? Because you can see from this video how quickly something can happen. So really, when I use the term or that example of common sense, we have to remember to always make sure that we're not doing things emotionally or we're not doing things that lack common sense to begin with, like leaving an unprotected laptop in an automobile in plain sight. A real story from a Boston hospital, laptop stolen, exposes data. And here's the thing about portable devices, these endpoint devices. If the data is encrypted on a laptop, it's not a reportable event. It means you're not going to suffer the consequences because no information is breached if it's encrypted. But if the means to encrypt it is on the computer itself, then they can find a way to do that. Then you do have to report it, and also the information is put at risk. So keep that in mind. Encrypted computers, means to decrypt it is not kept on the same endpoint computer like a laptop. And also Wi-Fi. Remember that St. Ascension Island I was telling you about? Only 800 people live there. There's a bigger island that people do visit from time to time. It is kind of a touristy place called St. Helena. If you were in St. Helena, and again, it's kind of in the middle of the ocean, but if you were using a hotel, they do have a hotel there, hotel Wi-Fi, you want to use a VPN. Public Wi-Fi is not secure, whether you're at a hotel in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, you're at a Starbucks, a restaurant, any type of place where you have public Wi-Fi, it's not secure. So don't be doing things of a sensitive nature unless you use a virtual private network to protect that information. So that's another important tip when it comes to using public Wi-Fi and patient data. Also, make sure there's not any administrative accounts on endpoint computers, uh, which could lead to them getting administrative access. Systems should be updated, as I mentioned earlier, but set to automatic updates, so you don't really have to worry about it on these endpoint computers as well. And then antivirus software, of course, is a must on computers, as well as full disk encryption if it involves any type of patient information. Let's talk about data loss. A couple more examples, and then we're going to do polling questions and also open it up for questions. A small liberal arts college in Illinois was subject to an attack, a ransomware attack. They didn't pay the ransom. They didn't want to pay any money at all. And the students received emails from the criminals. They had their email addresses because that was part of the breach. This is the exact wording in the email that went to students. 4,000 or so whose information was put at risk based on this attack that involved malware on a computer system. The only thing I've taken out there is the expletive. I'm not sure how many students paid to get their information not released by criminals, but if you didn't pay, they threatened to release it publicly, which put them at risk of identity theft and a bunch of other different risks out there with personal information being in the public domain. United Healthcare, we talked about that already, happened in February 2024. The effects lasted much longer than that. Talked about the gang that was involved in that attack. Talk about how the attack was a case of stolen credentials and then also no MFA in a legacy technology system. A legacy technology systems means that it's not being updated, not being fixed by the organization who created that legacy system. And with no MFA on it, they found an easy way in. Lots of information stolen in the United attack with huge amounts of cost. One simple tool could have prevented that from happening, as we've already talked about. Also, that had broad effects, not just on their company itself, but also on individual patients and then other companies who relied upon the information that United Healthcare provided for billing systems. This is the letter I got from Change Healthcare notifying me of a data breach. A lot of people got this letter. And what happens when information is released, it generally goes online for sale on the dark web. This is a success story. FBI and the IRS took down a series of dark web pages where they were selling personal information, namely socials and dates of birth. And because we almost have to assume our information is for sale out there, we should take steps ourselves. And on a personal level, if criminal bought our information and you see a lot of it was out there for sale and generating a lot of income for criminals on a wholesale basis, what do they do when they buy the information? They'll open up credit card accounts in the victim's name or get loans in the name. If they have the social security number and date of birth, they'll be able to do that pretty easily with some other basic information that's included in the breach normally. But they can't do that if you've frozen your credit reports. So on an individual basis, I highly recommend freezing your credit reports, and you will see information about freezing your credit reports on the handout that I'm going to drop into the chat here as soon as I'm done with the formal presentation, which is just in a couple of minutes here. This is what that looks like. There are 4 credit reporting agencies. Freeze all 4 of your credit reports and only lift the freezes when you want to get credit checked yourself. It's free. It doesn't affect your credit card relationships or your credit scores. I've done it myself. It's easy and it keeps you safe from fraud given the nature of and number of breaches that we've had out there. The last one I want to talk about here is financial attacks. And they get access to email accounts. Here's the next thing that can happen. Besides them gaining information about you, they can also intercept communications and kind of see what's going on in terms of payments. This is a true story of a company that was about to make a $400,000 payment to basically a vendor. And then right before the payment was supposed to be made, the vendor comes back. They thought it was the vendor and saying, our bank can't receive payments anymore. Does that make any kind of sense? And how many people change bank accounts? How many businesses change bank accounts at the last minute, right before they're supposed to receive a big automatic clearinghouse transfer of money to their account? Again, this doesn't make any sense, but the company redirected the payment to the criminal's bank account, and it was all due to the email account being hijacked and them getting information in advance notice that this was going to happen, this payment was going to happen, and asking them to redirect it. Also, fake websites can be used to steal login information. This is an example of an email. I've taken out the real bank logo and put in, a generic one to show you how criminals dress things up. That increases their response rate. Remember, this is going to take you to a fake login page. So we always hover to discover and we show this is not the bank site at all. It's in a site in a foreign country, and you might be able to determine what that foreign country is. It's Russia. That's what the RU stands for. Takes you to a fake login page. Criminals are going to log in at the real site because now they have your credentials and they'll try to withdraw money, but not all banks will let that happen so easily. But still, we are the first line in security for our business, our practice, and also ourselves in keeping online banking secure. Always log in directly, not through links, even if an email looks good, as I showed you, even if the link in the email looks good, as I've showed you. Always log in directly, and also set up alerts on your financial accounts so you'll know when something's happening. The sooner we know something's happening, the easier it is to reverse it and prevent further fraud. Alerts help us to do that. That should be set up for all the financial accounts that you're responsible for, including personal as well as your practice financial accounts. Now, a couple more things to share here. First of all, I showed you an email that had syntax errors, had some mistakes in it. Criminals are cleaning those up with AI. I went to ChatGPT and I typed in this, what you saw on the past page, I should say. I said, give me an example of a phishing email that is designed to steal bank login credentials, and this is what it gave me. So now criminals are using AI to clean up the spelling errors, the syntax errors, even if English isn't their first language. They're able to trick us more effectively because those telltale signs of fraud are not in these anymore. Also, talk about doing things with AI. AI is used also to clone voices, to fool authentication systems, to trick people into thinking a family member is calling them, asking for money because they've been arrested, they've been kidnapped, they've been in a car accident. That's called the grandparent scam. They're using AI to mimic voices that they record from someplace like TikTok, where someone's put a video and they put that voice into a program like this, Speechify, and make it say anything that they want. This is myself and my wife. We visited Lake Louise in Canada this past summer. That was a still picture taken by a friend. We didn't do this. We didn't jump in the water. AI created us jumping into the water. But if AI can do that, you can imagine how much more powerful AI is going to get in the coming years, because it's only 3 years old and it's already doing things like this to try to fake us with what we call deep fakes. When I graduated from the FBI Academy, there's the picture I showed you earlier. I did not do a little dance because I don't have any rhythm. That couldn't have possibly been me doing that. Again, a deep fake. Think about the power of AI and how it's being used to trick us, and keep that in mind as you navigate the world of cyber threats, as criminals are using that to try to trick us more effectively. And one word on a personal note, before we go to the polling questions, the grandparent scam is being used to trick people into thinking they have a child in trouble or a grandchild in trouble. And always, when you get a call like that from someone, hang up the phone, call them back at a number you know to be for them, because it's probably not them in trouble. Have a code word in the family that you can ask someone. If Jimmy calls up and says, hey, I've been in a car accident, I've been arrested. Jimmy, what is the code word that we've agreed upon? The criminal's not going to know the code word, even though the voice may sound like Jimmy, even a video may sound like Jimmy that they've used created with AI. And then finally, one more thing on a personal note, watch out for impersonation scams. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies are being used, their impersonation of those organizations is being used to trick people. As this person thought that she was actually talking to a real FBI agent about her money, her bank account being used by a Mexican cartel. Listen, if you're involved in a serious crime like this, even unwittingly, the FBI is coming to your door. They're going to show you credentials. They're going to meet with you in person. They're not going to communicate by email, text message, or phone call initially to establish contact with you. So watch out for government impersonations, even if they have the FBI seal in there or some other law enforcement agency. And even if they're really polite, like this happened last Christmas, and the person that was victimized by this said, well, they were government agents. They were very polite to me, so they couldn't have been criminals because they wished her happy holidays. That's what we do in the FBI, by the way. We go out and arrest people and we say, put your hands up. You're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. And by the way, happy holidays. Not quite like that. All right, I'm going to share this handout with you in just a second. And I'm also going to move to the polling questions. And for that,
Yes.
Eric, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Super interesting, intriguing subject matter there. Very well done.
Thank you.
The deepfakes, definitely a concern. We'll see how that goes in the future. But let's see. We turn it over to our attendees now and see how much they've been paying attention during your presentation. So let's launch polling question number 1. Okay, so hackers often target medical records because they're easier to hack than other records. They want to learn about health trends. There are very few laws that govern how the records are managed. Their sensitivity can facilitate large extortion payments. We'll give everyone a few seconds to answer. We're getting some responses already, and I will share those responses in a second. Getting a lot for their sensitivity can facilitate large extortion payments. But we'll give the rest of you just a couple more seconds. Okay, so let's share those results. And there you go, Jeff. Their sensitivity can facilitate large extortion payments. Looks like our attendees were definitely listening.
Yeah, that's definitely the right answer.
Okay, so let's go. We have a couple more polling questions. Let's go to number 2. What happens when medical records are breached? They may be fined by regulatory agencies. They may be the target of patient lawsuits, or they may lose business due to reputational damage, or all of the above. Give everyone a couple of seconds to answer. Well done, attendees. All of the above? 100%, Jeff?
Yeah, that's a good
Very
one.
well.
Thank you.
And our final polling question for today is, which of the following are true regarding ransomware attacks? They're used to extort money from victims. If you pay ransom, there is no guarantee that you will get access to your files. Most ransomware attacks are the result of someone clicking on an attachment in an email, or all of the above. Let's again give you all a few seconds. Well done, audience. Again, 100% all of the above. Jeff, any comments?
I mean, I would just say thank you for answering that question correctly. But the reason why I had that question in there is because I just want to reinforce how important it is to stay safe from ransomware attacks, because all those 4 things can happen, and usually they all four do, and it could be devastating for a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Okay, so looks like we do have some questions, Jeff, and we definitely
Okay.
have time, so I want to get to those too.
Okay.
So let's start with this one here that I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
If someone answers their telephone and merely responds to a question by saying the word yes, can that be used as a voice exemplar to get access to that person's bank or other financial accounts?
Yes, potentially with the power of AI now, just a simple response like a yes could be used through a cloning device. But see, for us, I mean, we can't keep our voice out of the public places like phone calls where people can get it.
Right.
Even something as simple as yes. But it's up to the companies that use voices as authenticators to make sure that they have more than just a voice exemplar to authenticate someone. So I wouldn't get too wigged out on your end, but from our perspective, I think that we need to have extra controls put in place as well. Alerts on financial accounts. If someone were to get access to an account and the company didn't do a good enough job of of using more authentication than just a voice, then, it's the onus is on them to make sure that they do. But in case they don't, we're going to know about it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's well said. I mean, you're seeing a rise on that, people using their voice to get in when they're calling up and gathering, their bank information and using that as a security measure. So, really good question. Here's another one for you. If a person freezes their credit reports, do they still need to have a credit monitoring service that notifies them when there's activity in their accounts at the credit reporting agencies?
Keep in mind that credit monitoring companies like that you may have heard advertised, like LifeLock, that monitor credit reports, they monitor it for activity, but they only let you know after something has happened. So someone's made an inquiry into your credit report, which may indicate that someone's stolen your identity, but it happens after it occurs. That's your notification after the inquiry happens. It may be too late to prevent what happened. But freezing prevents it from happening. So you can have credit monitoring, and that's always a good thing to have in case of you want this notification, because freezing doesn't notify you; it just blocks the threat. But it does makes total sense to have freezing as your first line of defense, and credit monitoring could be an addition if you want that.
Yeah, well said. Okay, great. I got one more here for now, unless we get any in the chat or any more in the chat. What's the first thing, Jeff, a person should do if they think they've been a victim of identity theft or another type of fraud?
Okay, the first thing you should do is basically get on the FTC website or the identitytheft.gov website, which you'll see those listed on my handout, and they give you a customized approach to what based on your circumstances. That the idtheft.gov does. FTC has additional information as well. And so if you've been victimized by identity theft and you put in your circumstances, it will tell you like steps 1 through 5 what you need to do next. But setting alerts on financial accounts, freezing credit reports are two of the things that I recommend.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like we don't have any other questions in the chat. If anyone has any more, we do have a minute or two. But it looks like we can wrap up then. Jeff, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, and educating us on these very important things around cybersecurity. I want to thank everyone for joining us. If and when you do leave the webinar today, again, there'll be a survey. Please complete that survey. It really helps us, and we like to hear from you, as I said at the beginning of our presentation. Also, for the CE credit, a friendly reminder, we send those out about 2 to 3 weeks after. So if you don't get an email right away from us with the CE credit, don't worry. You will definitely be receiving that to you within, again, about 2 to 3 weeks. Again, Jeff, any final parting words for our audience?
Yeah, I just go forth and stay safe online. And then I was not able to drop the handout into the chat, but I will send that to you separately if that's okay, Derek.
Absolutely.
You can get that. You can get that to the participants.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Again, on behalf of Jeff Lanza, myself, and our entire Rectangle Health team, we hope you enjoyed today's session. We hope you have a good rest of your week and stay vigilant.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.